Thank you, and that's a good point. The committee's happy to follow up. Perhaps we could get an inventory or some sort of indication as to what they're doing or not doing in that. So let us work with you on that as well. It's a good point. I'll now recognize myself. Mr. Horowitz, you said earlier that your office found no criminal conduct from anyone involved in Fast and Furious. I want to ask about former ATF Phoenix Field Division Assistant Special Agent in Charge George Gillette, who was heavily involved in running Fast and Furious. He had personally purchased a firearm. What happened, do you recall, to that firearm?
I do, and it was transferred by him to a non-U.S. national. And so he sold it to a non-U.S. national, and what happened with that gun? Where did they find it? I believe, if I recall correctly, it was a scene of a crime, but I'd have to go back and just make sure I remember. Yeah, I think that's the way we recall it as well. Mr. Brandon, when you fill out Form 4473, are you allowed to use your work address, or are you supposed to use your home address?
You're supposed to use the residence you live at.
If they put something other than your home address, can you prosecute those crimes? Is that a crime?
If you intentionally, knowingly put something down false on a form, yes, it is.
So the form says you're supposed to put your home address, correct?
I believe so, as I recall, yes.
Yeah. So something other than your home address would be inaccurate, correct?
Correct. I mean, I bought a gun last summer. I put down my apartment.
So did the Inspector General's office make any recommendation to the Department of Justice to consider prosecuting him for, this is Mr. Gillette, for lying about his address on Form 4473? Mr. Horowitz?
I don't believe we did.
And why not?
Because what we've been told, or we're told, is that for law enforcement agents at the department, many of them do not use their home address for security purposes, but instead use a P.O. box or UPS box or some other location, and that wasn't sufficient evidence of intent to warrant a criminal prosecution.
Even though he sold it to a non-U.S. national and it ended up at a crime, and he used an address that's different on the form, you just decided that, yeah, we won't prosecute that. And what's hard for the American people to understand is why that waiver. Are these forms publicly available? I mean, can you just go look this up?
I believe you can. I think if you go on the internet and look, it's on ATF's website.
But I mean, can you look up, oh, let's go find an ATF agent, and then we look at his form, see if he purchased anything, and oh, there's his address? I mean, what are we trying to protect from?
I defer to
Mr. Brandon. Is that common practice? Is that what ATF agents are doing, is putting work address on there?
You know, not to my knowledge. I was surprised at George Gillette's response, and candid to you, Mr. Chairman, I'm glad he's off ATF. He wasn't one of our best. And people that were doing undercover work, ATF would provide undercover identification, and that would be the permissible type.
Right.
But I think, if I remember correctly, he was using a drop box at a mail place, a P.O. box, and I was surprised. And it's not common that I know of to ATF.
This, let me switch gears. Mr. Brandon, you said that there was a person that was supposed to, who had the group supervisor who was supposed to have some responsibility here. We're going back to the Zapata case. I think the phrase you used, asleep at the switch. Mm-hmm. How long did it take for you to all figure out, and I'm not talking about you personally, but the organization, how long did it take ATF to figure out that there was somebody asleep at the switch? And the second part of that is, what happened to him? Was he fired? Was he disciplined? Did you give him bonuses? What happened to this person?
The person retired from ATF.
As a result of this, right after it? I mean, help me with the time span. 6 years have passed, so help me with the time span.
Well, I know the employee from reading the report that the OIG interviewed him. He retired before the report came out, and his reputation wasn't that of a dynamic leader that was engaged.
Mr. Horowitz, can you weigh in on this?
My understanding is he retired in June of 2012, so even before we got the referral in September 2012.
Okay.
And before we began our review.
Have you, Mr. Horowitz, have you had, we've talked in general about access issues to a whole host of things. Are you having access issues at the ATF?
We are not, and I want to be clear also, the delay had nothing to do with any access issues with ATF. We got what we needed. That was not a reason.
Outside the Zapata case, on a broader sense, are there access issues that you care to highlight here at this hearing?
Currently, we do not. The ATF has been very good in the last several years about getting us, even as we were having fights with DEA and FBI, our access issues with ATF were actually within connection with the Fast and Furious matter.
Well, let's note that 12/11, we got some good news. So congratulations, Mr. Brennan. We thank you for that.
Thank you.
Let's move on. My time's expired.
Mr. Chairman, can I?
Yes.
I didn't want to think anybody that I was lying. I confused that there was another employee that retired at the end of 16 that the OIG was critical of in documenting his surveillance and interview of an FFL. So that's what I was referring to my head, just for the clarification. I didn't want to be inconsistent.
Thank you. Let's go back to Mr. Lynch of Massachusetts for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.